Hello and good morning and welcome back to Plannercraft. So bear with me one moment, my camera seems to be playing up. Fantastic. But what we are going to be doing today is starting a mini album project. So without too much further ado, let's see if I can just jump in. Who knows, we might be able to fix the camera at the same time. On the other, maybe not. So that might be one for Ian later. Okay, so why have I jumped straight to my ScanNCut? So today we're going to be using some of the designs from our ScanNCut to actually create with. But obviously if we did everything on our machine, not only could it be a bit tedious, it could also be a bit difficult to get things accurate. So I wanted to show how we can kind of jump between the two if my camera would behave. It's not a happy bunny, is it? No, definitely not a happy bunny. Oh well. Morning, Deb. So we're having a few technical issues this morning, to say the least. It is not a happy bunny today. My poor camera is not liking me. So we'll see how it goes. Okay, so moving on. We're going to go to pattern. And we're going to start off by creating our pages. Now, obviously, if we were to be doing this straight from our ScanNCut and cutting it out, we may skip things like how we're going to actually bind the pages. But what I wanted to do is kind of show a few ideas with binding as well, so that you've got options. So let's go to basic shapes. And first of all, you need to decide what size of album you're going for. Do you want to go for a square album? Do you want to go for a rectangular album? Is that rectangle going to be portrait or landscape? So let's go down, and we can even use some of our more interesting shapes to actually create some of our pages with. Now we're also going to need some ring enforcers later, but we'll get there. So I'm going to move down to these down here. So these are already pretty much ready to go. And you can decide which layout you want to use. So I quite like the scallop, so let's go with that one. Okay, and we're going to size that up, and let's go up to 8 inches tall. Now this is going to be your first issue. So if we want to cut something that is that's okay, you can hop across YouTube. If you want to cut something that is a true 6x8, your first issue is going to be that it's going to try and do it across the page. So at this point you're going to just go okay and add that to the mat. It's nearly there, but it's not quite, but we're also not going to worry about that at this point. I'm going to go back to add, back to pattern, back to basic shapes, and back to that page that we just had, so just here. I'm also going to bring it in the one with the scallops at the top. And we're going to do the same again, so as big as it will go. Okay, and set that to the mat. Now it's going to say there's not enough space on the mat, and that's because we've already filled it. So we can go okay at this point, and let's go back one, and back again, and back to our mat. So before we go too far, this is our first opportunity to save something to Canvas to get it out of our way. So we're going to go to Save, Canvas, and it's going to say Save Successful. Okay. So then we can get rid of that panel. We can go back into Basic Shapes. We can go down to the bottom of the page, get the scallops at the top, and now we can increase that size again. Okay, set that onto the mat. Now, before we go back to that save function to send it back across to Canvas, we need to rescue it into Canvas. So let's go in there. And hi, Mom. My camera's having an off day, so I do apologise for any flickering. And let's go to display. We are going to go to import that FCM file because it's a cut shape that we want to bring in. And there's our first page. Okay. Now, I could do everything so it layers on top of one another, but let's give ourselves a bit of wiggle room. So if you have the tiling function, we can go custom size for tiling and we can make this as big as we need it to. So let's give ourselves a little bit of room to maneuver. Now, you definitely want your height to be over 24 inches for reasons that I will show you shortly. Okay, so now that we've done that, if I go back to the ScanNCut cam, we can now save that one and send that one. Okay, that's gone. Back to display, back to file, back to import FCM, and now it's going to bring in the next file. Now my advice would be at this point is to move these shapes out of that top left corner, because we start to get smaller and smaller bits. It's going to be trickier and trickier to see where they are to kind of get between them. Okay, so those are our main pages. So in our layers panel, we can actually give them a name. So top edge, don't need to say top and bottom. I'll do for, and scallop side edge. So, and you might also want to do a rectangle that is going to be the actual size. Now at the moment our pages are still all a bit higgledy-piggledy, but we want to actually start to size these to the actual size that we want. So I'm going to go to edit and I'm going to untick maintain aspect ratio for now, and that's because I'm going to want to pull these shapes into the final format that I want them to. So width of 12 and a height of 8 for our rectangle. So far so good. So that means that when it's cut we can do a score line, and I'll show you how to do the score lines in a minute. Next one. So again we can do 12 by 8 and again 12 by 8. Now you're not going to be able to cut these pages from 12 by 12 card. You're going to have to go up a size to the 12 by 24 or A3. Either or will do fine for this. Okay, so we've got our pages now. Now we just need to put that fold in. So there's a couple of ways that we can do this to help ourselves out. So let's bring in a nice thin rectangle. Okay. And we're going to slice the width of that to 6 inches. Doesn't matter about the height, it's just there as kind of a guide point. And let's zoom in. So we want to make sure that this rectangle here is lined up to our page, so we can use our left align function to make sure that is correct. Okay, now I'm just going to merge that very slowly upwards so that it's sitting on the edge of our page. Then I'm going to get my path tool. You can just type P if you want to. And when you hover over the point, you're going to see that it goes to a little blue square. And that's saying that it's ready to snap to that point. So we can just click once. Now if we press and hold shift, it's going to keep that line vertical. We're going to go down to the bottom edge of our page. Click once to say add the point and click again to say finish the line. At this point then you can set your line dash pattern. So if you want to do a half cut line, that's fine, and we can colour it red so that we know to do something different with that line. If you want to do it dashed, you can do that too. So what I would say is go for the one with the smallest dash and the biggest space. Okay. Or finally, you might want to use the paper piercing and do it that way, or the emboss tool. Same rules apply. So just make it so that you can quite clearly see that there is a difference there. So now I'm going to drag across those two shapes and I'm going to group. So Command G on a Mac, Control G on a PC. And we can do the same for each of our pages. So with this one, we can see that we're going to have a nice halfway point in our actual design there. So let's move that box out the way. And let's see if our path tool will be good again. There we go. So as long as you always get that blue snap point, you know you're in the middle. Click once. Then because we've got another point down here, we don't have to press and hold shift. We can just let it zoom to that point, so to speak. So 2 clicks again, and we can do the same. So we can say that that line is going to be red. Click and drag over the top and group. Now this one's going to be a little bit more tricky because we've got a shaped edge here, which means that we don't have a corner point for our box to kind of register to make sure it's in the right place. So we're going to move this over slightly, select both and let a line do the work for us. Okay, click off it. Now very carefully you want to just click once to highlight that box. So it's not click and drag, it's just click once so that we know that it doesn't accidentally move. And again we'll move it up so that that top line is in line. We'll go to the pen tool, let's get the point, press and hold shift down to the bottom and click twice, colour it red. Now we can get rid of that box because that's the last thing that we kind of need. So if you have like an album that you're thinking, well, I need 8 pages, so I need 8 copies of this. No, you don't. You just need the one. So don't get too hung up on having the right number of boxes for the number of pages. 1 per design is absolutely fine. Okay, so the next thing is if we want to cut this, it's not going to be able to cut landscape, it has to cut portrait. So let's rotate our pages around. And this is why we do our grouping, so that we don't lose our score lines at any point. So far so good. Now, because we want this album to be a true 6x8, that means our cover actually has to be bigger, so that we get a nice neat finish. So let me just check if there's any comments, just in case. Okay, nothing on YouTube. Let's just quickly check on Facebook. Okay, doesn't look like there are. So let's do our cover pieces next. Now, because I want to do something that has a spine of some kind, I'm going to do my covers as separate entities so that I can have options. So I'm going to bring in another rectangle or square, doesn't matter which, because we've still got our maintain aspect ratio turned off. I'm going to stretch that over the top and I'm going to take it down past our score line. So that's going to give us enough of a kind of leading edge to do our covers. Okay, so this is going to be the one time I'm going to break my own rules. So because it's a cover, I'm going to duplicate that so I have 2. And then I'm going to decide how much of a spine I want to have. So the way to kind of think of this is how many pages are you planning on cutting, and also how you're planning to bind them. If you are going to be doing something where you're stapling signatures, for instance, then you're going to probably need more of a spine than if you're doing a ring binding, for instance. So I'm going to go a bit closer together because it is only a mini album. We're going to left align them so that we know that it is together. And the reason we do two is I'm going to duplicate that shape again. So all I'm doing to do that is just press and hold Alt, then click on the shape and then drag it to get your duplicate. Okay. Now I want to drag this down and this up. And I'm doing that so that I want a little bit of a gap between our covers. It may not be a huge album, but for what we're doing it for, it won't hurt. Okay, so you should see something a bit like that. Now, let's just do an absolute check on the spacing. So again, we're going to line to the left, and then we can distribute our space vertically. Okay, and what that does is going to make this spacing in here equal. So why do it like that at this stage? Okay, so let's say you're cutting this from grey board, which you probably are. If we cut it with that gap in place already, that means that we can use our grey board as a template as well to make sure that we get our spacing right. Okay, but we're going to want to cover that grey board. So next what we're going to do is we are going to create two extra shapes. So rectangle again, and we're going to do our inner paper. So that's going to be slightly smaller than our cover. It's going to stretch all the way down here. So now you can see why I've done that in situ, so that we know that that is the right shape. So we're not having to worry about doing calculations. We're not having to go, well, if there's this number of pages, we need this spine width. Nope, keep it nice and simple. Now, before I go too far, what I am going to do is I'm going to group this grey board cover, and going back into our layers palette, we're going to go grey board cover pieces. And any time that you kind of are working with something like this where you've got lots and lots of pieces, make the layers panel your friend and actually name stuff. It just helps with your sanity a little. So that was the scallop side. This one is the scallop top. And this one's plain pages. Because you're going to want far more plain pages than what you're going to want for your scallop tops and sides. Okay. And finally, our new shape is our the terminology was there a minute ago, but it went. It's the end papers, isn't it? Yeah. There we go. Brain gets there eventually. Oh, even if the typing doesn't. So we're just going to want one of those for now. Okay, so we've got our end paper done. Now what I'm going to also do is do the shape around the outside of my cover. So I'm just going to bring that cover down and in a bit. Okay, so rectangle, and this time we're going to want to make that rectangle quite a bit bigger. And we're going to take that across that way, down this way. So far so good. And you want to have that kind of centered pretty much in the center of the group. So if we select the two again, we can use that line function to go centre and centre. So far so good. Now what we need to do is, if you've ever covered grey board, you'll be thinking, okay, we need to do something about this excess material here because it just won't work when you try and fold it. So let's get a triangle, and we want a right angle triangle. There we go. Told you. Typos galore today, honestly. Now we're going to shrink that down using the corner so we know it's keeping proportions. And at this point you can go, well, actually, you can see that's a little bit off. But as long as the angle is right, it's not going to be that important. So let's just get that centre point, so it's pointing at that corner. Sometimes your keyboard is your friend. Now you're going to see that I keep a gap. So if I click off, there's a very small gap there. And what that's for is when we wrap around any significant depth, you just want to have it so that you've got enough to kind of wrap around the very outside corner before it folds back on itself. I'm going to go about there. I'm going to duplicate that triangle and let's rotate it round. Same there. Rotate, wind it up. Okay. Okay, so once we've done that, we can actually subtract those triangles from our cover piece, and we will have a piece that is ready to actually wrap around. So you're going to select those 4 triangles and that outside cover shape. We can then go into our process overlap and we can go subtract. So now you should have something like this, where you've got your corners all cropped. Okay, so now that we've got that there, as we start to build up more items, you're going to see that things again start to overlap. So what you're going to want to do is just be a bit aware of that and go, well, actually, if I need a bit extra, if we go into the artboard setting, we can just increase either a width or a height depending on what we need to do. So let's just give ourselves a little bit more room. And there we go. So far so good. And we just want to name that last shape. So cover paper. Okay, so we've brought in some of our page shapes from our machine. Now you could carry on and do all your decorative elements in the same file if you wanted to, but to be honest, at this point I would say that your kind of structure is complete, so save that as a project. So we're going to go to Save As. Let's go on desktop, new folder, and we'll call it Summer Mini Album. And we can say structure, because that's what it is. Now, if we go to tiling at this point, you're going to see that it's got lots of pieces that are kind of chopped up all over the shop. But what we actually want to do is kind of be a bit clever about how we're doing that. So if we cancel that a second, I'm just going to give myself a little extra room between these elements here. And let's make it so that they're kind of all level. So we're going to use our grid to help us out here. Doesn't have to be spot on, but close enough would be good. Okay, so premium tiling. We want the 12 by 24 because we know our pieces won't fit on a 12 by 12. Okay, now if you see something like this where it's going over, that's your clue to this bit here, for instance, that where it splits needs to move down. So again, we can cancel that. We can go back to our artboard because we know we need more height. Now 24 times 2 would be 48. So let's give ourselves good 50 inches so we've got a bit of room to spare. And all these shapes at the bottom, we're going to click and drag over the top. We're going to move that down. And again, we'll try and level those up. So, and the reason we do that leveling is then we know that if we need to have more space, it's going to be a lot easier for us to move those pieces around. Okay, so tiling, it's still a little bit off, even though we're saying that there's no overlap, there's no weeding box. So 12 by 24, and then we're all right. So this section here is now split across this way. So what you could do is go, okay, I need to add, more space between them, or sometimes a weeding box can help you out. Now, because we're not working with vinyl, what I would say is on this occasion is move the pieces. If you're working with vinyl, the weeding box can actually be a bit of a useful addition. But when it comes to cards, sometimes it's a bit wasteful. So let's cancel that. Increase our width. So we can move that one across to here. That one across to here. And let's see how that's looking. So premium tiling. Remember to flick it back to that 12 by 24. Okay, so our grey board here is coming onto a 4th A. So if you look at your tiling, they've got little codes. So A1, A2, A3, A4. So A1, A2, A3, and A4. So we can sort that out nice and easy. Select those, move it across. I'm going to do the same with this one here, just take that a bit further. And let's see how that goes. Tiling, try again, 12 by 24. Okay, so we can see that there's still something going on here. And it's kind of doing things that are a bit weird. But everything else kind of looks right. So what can we do? Let's cancel that for a moment. So at the moment we know that we've got next to no padding around our shapes. So let's bring in another shape. And we're going to give that a size of 12 inches. And the reason we do that is then we can see where our cut-off point should be. So then when I put this one here, you can see, aha, that's where the problem is. So we can go, actually this one needs to move across. So now I can take these shapes, and these are only rough guides, remember, and just make sure down here too. Okay, let's try that. So if we do 12 by 24, and if I just quickly show you with these other boxes in place, you can see there's a little bit of overlap there, and that's where it's like catering for the cuttable area. So that's just something to bear in mind, but we're not going to get close to that point. So now, before we go too much further, you're going to notice that there's some little exclamation marks here and here. And tiling's a bit of a funny one when it comes to open lines and dashed lines and things. It doesn't generally like them. So we have to be a bit clever sometimes and just give ourselves something to work with in terms of score lines. So this one here is fine, totally random. Let's cancel that for a moment. Let's take these out. So we've got our shapes in the right place. Now it's just a case of just fiddling. So if I go into the group, let's get into our line there. For whatever reason, it's okay with that one, so I won't change that one. So let's see if just changing the colour sorts it out. Sometimes it can be a bit but we'll see. There you go. Just change it to black and it's fine. He's just having a wobbly. There we go. So we now have our pages with our score lines, our inner cover, outer cover, and our cover file for our grey board all done ready. So next, what you're going to do once you're happy with everything in terms of the layout is we're going to go to export that. So when we go to export, because you're exporting multiple FCM files at once, it's not going to give you the option of sending it to the machine, quite rightly, and we can just plot them all in that same folder. So we can go choose, and that's it. Nice and simple. So how do you work with a file from there if you want to work with Wi-Fi? Because there's two options. Okay, so before we go too far, just save that file. So we've got that updated layout, and we're going to open a new document, go to artboard, and because it's going to remember that tiling option, I want to just adjust back to a 12 by 24 because we know that our FCM file is 12 by 24, and then we can just import that in. So you can either go import from your computer or you can use the SVG button. And we can bring in whichever page that we want. So it might be that you want to start off with your pages, or what I would typically do is start off with the actual greyboard piece. So I'm not going to cut greyboard live on stream because, well, yeah, because time. So what I will do instead is I will probably upload a video with that cutting sort of later this week. But your challenge for today is to get up to this point where you've got your pages ready to go. So at the moment, what I've done is I've scored the pages. So if you can get to that point, then we can talk about rings and stuff. So I'm just going to cancel that for a minute. And let's go back to open so I can have my structure back in front. So let's say you haven't got paper big enough. What can you do? In which case, instead of using the shapes that have this scallop top and bottom, or edge and edge, you're going to want to use one that just has it on one edge. So in your basic shapes, there's one down here that we can just add on. That's going to come in just here. Okay. Now at the moment that's pretty square, so I'm just going to add another copy. And if I'm really good, I can lay that over the top. So let's select the two and we can get that left aligned so that we know that they're at least in line. So left align. And it's going to bottom shape and just nudge that so that those lines line up on this edge here. Then we can select both and add that together, and we've got a page. So that then means that we can size that to 6 by 8. So width of 6, height of 8. There we go. So for those of you that only have 12 by 12 or A4 papers, then that's the shape you would use, and then you can use the ring binding option to put those pages together. Another option might be that you might want to add on a hinge, so let's show you how to do that as well. So I'm going to go for this little shape here, so it's like a flattened hexagon. Bring this down. We're going to rotate it 90 degrees. So to do that, if we press and hold shift and then rotate, it should snap to that vertical. Okay. We're going to stretch that down so that it lines up at the bottom. Okay. Now at this point, you're going to see that we've got this really stretched angle here when that's actually not what we need. So if we click again, we're going to get to nodes. We're going to click on that top left node. Now, rather than try and do this with the mouse, which is going to be far too tricky, let's use the keyboard instead. So I'm pressing and holding shift because I've got quite a big alteration to make. And I'm going to hit the up arrow and take that up to about there. So it's still sitting below this top line, but we've got a bit more central of an angle. Then do the bottom left point, we're going to do the same again. Now, instead of measuring, what you can do is actually count your key presses. Okay, so I'm going to click off those two, click and drag over the top, weld it together, and we have our page with our little glue tub. And we can still do that same process of clicking, shift, down to the bottom, click once, click twice. Okay. Now, if you don't have the tiling function, then what you would do is create all of these bits individually. So, for instance, you'd have all your pages in one file and then just flick between your layers. Another option might be that you want to do ring binding. So you can do this with either sets of papers. So let's first of all get a shape that we can use for our page. So this time let's go for this one. Quite a fun one. And again, we'll size it to 6 by 8. Okay, now we could turn that into a pocket and all sorts, but I will cover that when we get onto pockets. So now I need a circle. I'm going to click and drag that in, save me scrolling up and down. I'm going to size that down. Now, once things are small, they can be a bit tricky to get hold of. Okay, so either do things where you need to drag over the top. Try not to get the other shape as well. Let's move that out of the way. And we're going to do a copy. So we're going to press and hold Alt, click and drag. So we've got copy. And because I'm going to do this with rings, I'm not too worried about the spacing between them. If you wanted to do this for a ring binder, then obviously you need to do your measuring. And there's a video that I did that on a while back. Okay. So we've got the holes in place. I'm going to group those so they're a little bit easier to handle. Take those up and over the top. Okay. Now at the moment they're quite big, so let's just take those down just a little. And I'm looking at the width in the top panel to judge that by, so that there is good enough. And we can move that either manually into the middle, or we can just click and drag over the top and use a line function to get that to the middle. Job done. So I did mention earlier about reinforcers. So let me hop back to my controller and go to the remote. Okay. Wake up the ScanNCut. Always good. Okay, so let's go to edit, and I'm going to delete that page because we don't need it anymore. I'm going to go to basic shapes, and let's scroll down to the bottom. Now we've got a couple of shapes down here that we can use for ring reinforcers. Now if you are working on lower models, you may not have all of these shapes available. So what I would say is all they are is two circles, one smaller than the other, and then the smaller circle is subtracted from the larger circle. So you can do that in Canvas, but sometimes it's just easier to just cheat, which is what I'm going to do now. So let's select our ring reinforcer. I'm not bothered about the size because I'm going to size that in my actual software. So I'm going to set that onto the mat, save to Canvas. Okay, then in Canvas we can go import from cutting machine FCM, and if I zoom out, it's up here. So at the moment it's Mahoosive. So we can shrink that down to when our centre aperture is about the same size as the hole we've got there. If we line it over the top, that is pretty close. So I think we can say that's okay. So we're going to need 2 of those per page. So typically what I do is if I've got something like this where I've got my page there, I'll pop that with the 2 in there so that you can just copy it. Okay. Another option might be if your album's going to have a lot of wear and tear, instead of just doing 2, you could actually do 4. So if you're struggling to kind of get to grips with the shape, then you can always work with it in the layers palette from there. And let's take a copy. There we go. Now you see in here it's actually got that that's a group. So if you want to be officially correct, you can use subtract it if you want. You really need to do that if you're going to start looking at putting things inside frames. But for now, that'll do. So hopefully that's given you some ideas on all the different bindings and how we can build those within Canvas itself. So let me just check on chat. Okay, nothing on YouTube. Let me just check Facebook. Okay, nothing on Facebook as far as I can see. Okay, so if you do have any questions, don't be afraid to reach out, and I will cover everything that I've done today up to this point. So beyond that, you'll have to come back and watch next week. So just save that so that we've got our structure, and I will see you probably next Wednesday. So coming up in the next week, we've got Deb's premiere on Friday at 11 AM over on YouTube. We also will have a live from SJ on Monday at 7 PM, and I'll be back same time next week. So take care and bye for now.